Here's our simple popper, and it turns out that to create an object like this, we're going to spend an awful lot of time in a part of FreeCAD called the sketcher. So take a look at the side profile here of this file, and let's see what the sketch looks like. That's the basic outline. And I have a version of that in this file here. In virtually all CAD programs, in order to create a 3D object, you first have to create a 2D sketch. And then after you have that sketch, which is just a set of lines, you can extrude it and make it into a three-dimensional shape. So I'm going to go ahead and create a new file, and we will create this sketch together. I'm going to close the other two files just because I don't want to make any changes to them. I'm a brand new unnamed file here. I'm in the part workbench here, and I'm going to choose this icon here, Create Sketch. And when I do that, the very first thing you have to do is choose a plane. I always design the major outside profile of my lures on the YZ plane, so we'll choose that. When you first come into the sketcher, then it loads up and you can see all the icons on the toolbar have changed. And this is what your interface looks like. Let's just take a quick tour of what we're looking at. So this dot right here in the middle is called the origin of the sketch. And then the green line and the red line are axes. And those will change depending on your orientation. But if you look down here in the corner, you can see which ones are which. Now you're going to create circles, arcs, lines, rectangles, things like that. By using these options up here on the toolbar, these are the actual elements of your sketch. So let's go ahead and just drop a line now and set it down. We've just created our first line, and if I hit the right key on my mouse or escape, I can get out of that tool and now I can navigate around. The second thing that's most important about the sketcher is the constraints, and that's these things here. And they give you constraints for your geometry so that things stay where you want them. For example, right now I have a constraint here called a point on line constraint for this line because FreeCAD automatically chose that when I put that first point of that line near that axis. But I can move up and down here, and I can make this line longer or shorter, and I want to constrain that down. So another thing to know about this is that there are two kinds of elements, or two kinds of geometry here. One is regular geometry, which is what we're looking at now, and one is construction geometry. So if I come up here, and it's right in between all the elements and the constraints, there's this thing that says toggle construction geometry. I'm going to do that now. I'm going to create a circle and just drop it on my sketch and close the sketch. And when I do that, you'll notice that I have my line from the sketch visible, but I don't have the circle. Let's go back in there and delete this circle. This circle is only to be used inside the sketch and will not affect your 3D operations. So let's build that sketch of the outline of that simple popper. I'm going to go ahead and delete what I already did. I'm going to stay in construction geometry here, and I'm going to create a line. I'm going to drop it on that axis and drag it out. And I'm going to move it so that it's pretty much straight across, and then you'll notice that little minus sign looks like a minus sign, and that just means it's a straight line constraint. The next thing I'm going to do is I am going to hit the D key on my keyboard to quickly access something called the dimension tool. And if you look at it, you can constrain all sorts of dimensions. But I'll just use the hotkey, and I'll hit that point and drag it out, and I will type 8 millimeters. All right, the next thing I'm going to do, now this is going to be the midline of my lure. So I'm going to have some lure above it and some lure below it. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to toggle out of construction geometry, and I'm going to create the front and the back of the lure. So I'm going to go ahead and draw a straight line here, And then I'm going to zoom in a little bit and select that point and select that point and select this point from the line. And I'm going to use a symmetry constraint, which is right here. And that will put that point from the construction line directly on this line. And now, if I move either one of these points, you can see both sides of the line are the same length. Now that I've got that line on there, I want to constrain how far away it is from the origin. So I'll go back to my dimension tool and I'll grab the origin point and that point, and I'll make this 75 millimeters long, say. That'll be the total length of our lure. I need to also constrain the height of this back of our lure, and I'll just choose 9 millimeters. Let's go ahead and create the front of our lure. We'll grab a line again. We will look for that symbol that now looks like a vertical bar. And I will get out of the tool, select that point, and that point, and use the symmetry constraint again. I used the hotkey on my keyboard that time. Let's distance this at 12. And then let's create the top and bottom arc of our lure. So to do that, we'll come back up here to the geometry tools, and I'm going to choose create arc by 3 points. I'm going to get really close to that point and hover until I see that crossbar, and that will constrain the edge of the arc to that. And the same thing with this back point. There's my crossbar, and now I just have to drag this to decide, is it going to go up, is it going to go down, and basically what does the arc look like. I'll just drop that for now. Let's do this again on the bottom. And I'm going to take advantage of the fact that I created this midline here and I have this axis. I will select the arc and I'll select the axis, and I will use a tangent constraint, which will make that line smoothly curve, just touch the axis and come back. And I want the top to look just like that. So if I select both arcs and use an equality constraint, they'll be the same. If I close out of the sketch now, I've created my first sketch. I can extrude that sketch now and make it a 3D object. It's not rounded on the edges, of course, but in order to do that and in order to make this shape a little more complex, we need to use something called a loft, which we'll discuss in a future video.